There's no way that Sean McVay would hire this former NFL head coach to be his defensive coordinator. Would he? That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramily, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and drop those comments down below. Like I said, we're doing a mailbag episode this week. Any questions you have for us about your Los Angeles Rams, drop those, and we will answer them on a future episode. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade. SI, 24/7 Sports, Dodgers Nation. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre-half and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He just finished his 8th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, a first look at the 2024 Rams schedule. How difficult is it going to be? Got some of the matchups. We're going to talk about that. But we're going to focus on the defensive coordinator hiring. We got some updates. The next guy they're going to be interviewing, a candidate that the Rams want but might not be able to get. That's coming up. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNFL to get started. Now, the journey to get a new defensive coordinator and replace Raheem Morris, who is now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, continues, Travis. And we've got news that the Rams will be interviewing, drumroll please, Ron Rivera. Riverboat Ron.
Yep.
Thoughts on the possibility? For me, it's an interesting name.
Yeah, because it's a name that we all know, right? It's a name that we have mixed associations with. Like, depending on how you feel about Ron Rivera, I should say. Are you talking about Carolina Ron Rivera, which was okay for a minute or two? Or are we talking about Washington Ron Rivera, which wasn't very good? Like, and is a guy who was a mediocre to maybe less than mediocre head coach, does that disqualify him from a chance to become a very good defensive coordinator? Do you want a guy that has, whether it was a smash success or not, that's kind of got head coaching chops in the room with you? I think that's really interesting, to just have another set of eyes that has sat in the big chair, knows what it's like, knows some of the decisions that go into it. Can Sean McVay just pick the good stuff out of that? I think he probably can. I also like the idea of finding somebody that's a little bit more of an up-and-comer, a little bit more of somebody that is, kind of striking their own way through the NFL, not somebody that's backing their way back out of the NFL. And that's what it feels like to Ron Rivera. Again, I know this is repetitive, and I know that the everydayers are probably, knowing what I'm about to say. If Sean McVay likes it, I love it. So if that's what he wants to do, then that's certainly good enough by me. Personally speaking, I think I'd rather go a little younger, a little more up-and-comer than somebody that's just been in here. And because Ron Rivera just feels a little bit stale to me.
Agree with what you said about that, for sure. About the staleness, it feels like a retread. It feels like a guy that, yes, just because he failed in Washington as a head coach does not mean he can't have success in this league as a defensive coordinator. We talked about that yesterday when it comes to Brandon Staley. But about your point about an up-and-comer. When it comes to up-and-comers, I'm all for the up-and-comers. My top choice, I want Denard Wilson from the Baltimore Ravens. I want to see that Ravens scheme where there's a lot of pre-snap movement. You're simulating the blitzes. You're just trying to make life hell for the quarterback. And it's just a different approach. If you're going to go a different approach, you're going to go younger. I'd rather see a new scheme rather than continue on the Vic Fangio method, right? What we see with Brandon Staley, what we see with Raheem Morris, I think this is an opportunity to really zig. And I think that's where I would go. But to your point as well, look, you talk about the up-and-comers. Maybe this is Sean McVay saying he wants some more stability, because you get these up-and-comers, They're here for a year, here for 2 years, and they're gone.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because with Jimmy Lake, right? He just gets picked up and he's going to Atlanta as well with Robinson and obviously with Raheem Morris as their new head coach. So you're dealing with an exodus. I do think that that's just going to be the reality of the Los Angeles Rams coaching staff. As long as Sean McVay is still Sean McVay, as long as the Rams continue to be one of the best run franchises in the league, you're going to have to deal with coaches leaving to go take head coaching jobs other places, and they're going to take some of your staff with them. That's just the reality of life as a Rams coach. The stability is very interesting. And I think the thing that makes me feel the best about this is that they've had an older guy like a Wade Phillips, who was exactly the right guy at the right time. They've gone young and unproven in a guy like Brandon Staley, who flipped that into a head coaching job in pretty short order. Raheem Morris, I don't want to say rehabilitated his image because it didn't need rehabilitation, but he went in and did a really good job with the Rams and turned that into another opportunity as a head coach. So I don't know if Ron Rivera is looking to, put his feet up and hang out at the beach when he's not working. I don't know, but having an old head, and I say that as a compliment, I say that as a guy with white in my own beard, somebody that wants to just, I'll come in and I'll do this job and I'll do a good job, but I'm not trying to push to that next level. I've been there. This is a good fit for me. I don't think that's the end of the world either.
I agree. I mean, like you said earlier, if Sean McVay wants Ron Rivera, then there's something that makes sense about that we might not know about, right? And you have to trust him in that situation. But just looking at these playoff games in the last couple of weeks, I want teams that are aggressive to the ball, that are making tackles, that are mixing up great schemes and coverages, right? I mean, look at Steve Wilks' name trending, right? I mean, You need a guy that goes in there and has a scheme that's going to work in the regular season and in the playoffs. Because look, just watching that Rams-Lions game a couple different times, you need 11 dudes just going after the football and making tackles. I mean, you could make a case that those missed tackles almost hurt the Rams as much, if not more, than those 3 field goals in the red zone when you kind of look back at it. But it's definitely going to be a decision you're going to have to make. And really, a candidate is going to throw this in there. Candidate Ejiro Evero was a lot of people's top candidates. We talked about him on the very first episode when Raheem Morris was hired. He might not get an opportunity to join the Rams because he's still under contract for 1 year. Typically, when a new head coach is hired and they've made their new head coach hiring after firing Frank Reich, that usually you don't see them stay on. But this is a situation where they like him. He's so successful and such a positive influence there that they want to keep him on, but they have the right, because it's a lateral move. He's getting $3 million there in Carolina, that he can't interview with the Rams, and they've already blocked interviews for him with the Dolphins and other teams around the league.
Yeah, and take this for what it's worth. Carolina is such a tire fire that who knows what they're doing, and that has nothing to do with Evero. Like he's obviously a very highly regarded guy and a guy that a lot of people would like to get their hands on, but trying to get him out of Carolina might be a little tricky. And Carolina has, unfortunately for them and their fans, probably has taken the mantle as worst owner in the NFL. Somebody that's the most impulsive owner in the NFL, somebody that turns this thing over. So he might not be available right now, but tomorrow or next week or next month or next season, who knows what that's going to look like, because Carolina is an absolute mess. Yes, that's a name that you hear over and over again. It's more like what you and I are talking about, somebody that's on the ascent as opposed to somebody that's, been in the league a long time and probably, getting closer to their last job than their first job. But yeah, the Carolina thing makes that a really difficult thing to figure out, just because that organization's run so poorly.
Yeah, and if you get Evero, we've seen that movie before, right? I mean, he's been with the Rams in the past for 5 seasons. He went on to Denver with Hackett, but we know what would happen, right? He goes to the Rams, has a couple years, and he gets a head coaching job somewhere else, which is not always the worst thing because you get those compensation picks, right? So there are some pros for that. But come on, I mean, if you're the Carolina Panthers, like you said, it is a tire fire. You got their owner, David Tepper, throwing drinks on fans, which everyone complains about. I'm like, my owner, give me free drinks? Why not? What's wrong with that? I think it's pretty nice,
one
right?
Of those Bart Simpson funnels that you put up over your head, and you can start to catch the drinks as they come from the owner's suite.
Exactly, that not? Bart Simpson fun. I love that. But coming up next here on Locked on Rams, an early look at the Rams 2024 schedule. How difficult is it going to be? That's coming up next here on Locked on Rams.
Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate, all of us, from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat at the party, grabbing your favorite snacks, and placing a lot of super fun bets, right? Who doesn't like that big table? It's got the chips, it's got the salsa, the guacamole. Maybe there's a big pot of chili. Maybe there's dogs and burgers and a box of pizza or 2 or 3. I mean, the football, yeah, that's great and everything, but that giant spread, couple of cold beers, maybe, soft drink of choice, not a bad way to do it. FanDuel has so many ways for you to get in on the last part of that great day, too, to end your season with a W or 2 or 3, right? Not only can you bet who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored in the game, and so much more. So new customers, if you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to our everyday listeners out there watching every episode, listening to every episode. Can't thank you guys enough. You can join that Everyday Listeners Club too, by the way. Add a couple every week. It'd be awesome. And you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. Now, Travis, here in our next segment, we're talking about this Rams schedule for 2024. Now, of course, we don't know the dates, right? We don't know the order, but what we do know is that they will play a second place schedule. They're going to face a lot of really good teams in 2024. Yep. On paper, the Rams have the 12th hardest schedule in the National Football League. Their opponents combined to go 146 and 143 this past season. They'll face 10 games against teams that finished above 500, 7 teams that made the playoffs. Oh, and then you got the Vikings and Jets, who will be a lot better next season with their quarterbacks back. So it's going to be a very interesting schedule, but like we learned last season, it's the NFL. Like you always say, it's a lot of teams that are going to be better than you thought, worse than you thought. And on paper, though, definitely looks like a challenge.
It is, and this is the price you pay when you have a good team. This is the price you pay when you're perennially in the playoffs, that you're going to have to go play other teams that were in the playoffs. You're going to have to go play other teams that finished high up in their divisions as well. This is why the NFL is so much fun for all of us, because it's really hard to stay on the top. And the Rams have done about as good a job as you could ask for. Sean McVay's only missed the playoffs twice in the 7 years that he's been there. He's missed the playoffs as often as he's gone to the Super Bowl. That's a pretty good batting average right there in a relatively short period of time. So yeah, the schedule makes a big difference. But like you mentioned, there's a couple of teams on that schedule that we're playing, oh, that's going to be a tough game. They'll be bad. There's probably a couple of teams on that schedule like, well, you're going to get that one. They'll be really good. You just never know exactly. You got kind of a rough idea. I think one of the things that's really interesting about the Rams schedule coming up this season is in the division. We know San Francisco is going to be a monster because they always are. But I think there's a huge delta in what Arizona and Seattle could be. Arizona could maybe be good. They looked a lot better at the end of the year than they did at the beginning of the year. Seattle, I don't know. We're still waiting to see what their new head coach looks like. Pete Carroll is a guy that Sean McVay always matched up pretty well against. We'll see who they put in there. Whether or not they make a decision on a quarterback, if they decide to keep Geno Smith. So just even in the division, it's really interesting because those 2 wins against Arizona that you always kind of felt like you had in your back pocket, maybe not. And a team that you felt like you matched up pretty well with Seattle, who you beat twice last year. They got a new coach coming in. They still have a pretty talented roster. So just in the NFC West, it could be a challenge.
Yeah, the Cardinals, the Seahawks, if you look at their schedules, they'll face the 7th easiest schedule in the NFL based on their 2023 record. 49ers, their strength of schedule, it's the same as the Rams, despite finishing first in the division and winning the division. But yeah, it's
might be the Super Bowl champion.
Yeah,
you may have the defending Super Bowl champion in your division, and we know what that can mean, right? That is about as tough a putt as you're going to get.
100%. And there's a lot of teams. You look at the Raiders, right? The Raiders with Pierce, he had a lot of success. They could have a better quarterback. Their defense, they looked a lot better towards the end. That game, when you look at the Raiders, I mean, that's going to be a big matchup, and that's a home game. Okay, it's going to be a lot of silver and black in SoFi Stadium. And you just look at the schedule as a whole, and it kind of makes you think about a conversation we had a few weeks ago, whereas this Rams team, they're not sneaking up on anyone, right? They're not only talented with the roster they currently have. Look, guys like Puka Nacua, they're not going to sneak up on you. They're household names at this point. You used to have Aaron Donald, Stafford, and Cooper Kupp, and they're going to go out there and make some free agent signings. They're make some trades, right? So by the time the season rolls around, it's going to be the Niners as the favorite, but it's going to be the Rams. They're going to be there right in second place. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle this pressure of knowing that, okay, we are not that team that's the little engine that could Rams anymore, right?
Yeah, well, they have something that they didn't have last year. Now, the good news is they've had it before, and we're talking about expectations, right? The 2023 Rams, the season that we just completed, had zero expectations. I think that, if you would have said to people, what is a more likely scenario, that they win 10 games or that they have a top 2 or 3 draft pick, I think most people would have picked the draft pick, right? They won 10 games. Now, they had no expectations coming into the year. This year, huge expectations. Matthew Stafford is coming off of a season where he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Kyren Williams was one of the best running backs in the league. Puka Nacua became, like you mentioned, D-Mac, one of the most popular players in the entire NFL in his rookie season. Cooper Kupp is a name we still know. Aaron Donald is still one of the best defensive players in the league, and they're going to have a top draft pick. They're going to have some acquisitions in the free agent market. There's going to be big expectations all over again. How do you handle that? I think they'll do pretty well because we've seen them do it before, but this isn't house money like they played with last year. They need to be good. They'll be expected to be good.
They're going to be expected to be good, and also a lot of their success or failure is going to be determined by the schedule makers and the advantages and disadvantages of home and road games. We know that's always an impact, especially for West Coast teams, and we don't know when each game is going to be played, and that's what I'm looking for, the travel advantages. Yeah. Where are you going to see these games played as far as what time of the year? I'm so excited that finally you got the Green Bay Packers at SoFi Stadium. Right? They're not going to Green Bay where you have to watch about your beer temperature so it doesn't get frozen.
The last time, and I'm going by memory here, but I'm pretty sure this is right. The last time we saw the Packers in LA, they were playing at the Coliseum very early in the Rams' tenure back here in Los Angeles, and it just hasn't worked out. We've seen them go to Green Bay for the playoffs. We've seen them go to Green Bay during the regular season. It's been a place where they have really looked bad, almost without exception. So it's an opportunity for them to kind of turn the tables a little bit. And again, Green Bay, that's another team that is coming in that we expect to be pretty good all over again. That's going to be another one of those very, very difficult games for them.
Yeah, I think they haven't played in LA since 2018, and before that, it was with Bart Starr. I mean, so only 2 Bart shout-outs on this show today. Bart Starr, Bart Simpson. Of course, you had the Bart man with the funnel like you're talking about. Love me some Bartman. So shout out to the Barts on this show. But there are some scheduling quirks that the Rams took advantage of that are going to be in their favor next season. We're going to break those down next here on Locked On Rams.
Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at eBay Motors. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, Travis, here we're going to pick up on this schedule topic, and interesting little change towards the end is since the Eagles kind of had a collapse towards the end, they had a big lead in the NFC East, and over the last month of the season, you saw that team start to collapse. And of course, no team in the NFC East has won that division back-to-back years in 20 seasons. So now the Rams will be playing the Eagles next season instead of the Cowboys. And even though, yes, the Cowboys during the regular season, the playoffs, they're very different. I always say that the star on their helmet is not a logo, it's a rating. I'd much rather play them in the regular season than the postseason, but I'd rather play them never from the Rams based on last year. So I'm okay with playing the Eagles over the Cowboys this upcoming year.
Yeah, the Eagles are an interesting team. It felt like they were kind of set up to be one of the teams that we're talking about in the NFC for a while. You know, Jalen Hurts feels like a real guy. They've got that play that feels unstoppable in the brotherly shove. They've got some really big playmakers on the outside, and it felt like they had a defense that was set up for the long haul. You know, they Jalen Carter, they drafted some guys. They just looked like a team that was going to be a handful for a while to come. And then they just collapsed at the end of last season. And I can't speak to exactly why it happened, and maybe they'll get it figured out. But to go from the Super Bowl to having Nick Sirianni nearly lose his job by the end of the next season, something stinks in that building. Something's not working the way that it's supposed to work. The Rams hung with them even before they really figured out what it is that they were trying to do this last season early in the 2023 season. So I don't mind that Philadelphia matchup. I mean, there are really no easy games in the NFL, and that's certainly on the opposite side. But I think when you look at what the Rams are going to put on the field next year, and we'll see exactly what their finished hand is, I think they're going to match up pretty well with everybody because we know they're going to score. We know that they're comfortable going to other places and winning games. We've seen them do that time and time again. It's whether or not they can get a defense that can get off the field when they need to get off the field. I think that's the thing that most Rams fans are preoccupied with. And, you know, a team like Philadelphia who can really kind of grind it out at times can sometimes give them a problem.
And it's Philly at home again, too. So I just want to point that out. Look, the Eagles don't scare me. They look dysfunctional right now, right? Yes. I mean, I think the shine is off of Jalen Hurts at this point. I don't think they're a team that really knows where their identity is moving forward. They have a lot of talent. They could get it together. I mean, Kelsey is probably most likely going to be gone with his shirt off, just have beer with fans and celebrating. So just very different in Philly this year as far as heading into the season. It's going to be very different. Now, you also got the Saints. Saints are interesting, too. They almost made the playoffs. Yeah. Of course, Ross Jackson is someone who covers the Saints, Locked On Saints thing. Him, along with you, are the very best hosts of this network. The great Ross Jackson, 10 out of 10. He's the best. So we had some great preview episodes with him. Then the Raiders, like we talked about, hiring a new coach, maybe a big-name quarterback this offseason. And then how about the AFC East? You got the Bills, the Dolphins. They made the playoffs. The Patriots, of course, they're going to have a new coach, new quarterback. Jets, you're going to have Aaron Rodgers back. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, I think the only team in the AFC East that you feel like, okay, we'll see what they are is New England, right? New England feels like, all right, maybe that's one that you should probably win, but I don't know what the Jets are going to look like with Aaron Rodgers. If he's Aaron Rodgers-ish, I think that's a tough team to beat because they got a real quarterback. We know Miami and the Buffalo Bills are going to be tough teams because they were a couple of playoff teams a year ago. I want to go back to what you said about the Saints. I feel like the Rams have played the Saints every year since they've come back to LA. And I'd have to go back and do it. I know there's been a playoff game in there, maybe I think just one playoff game against the Saints. Play them in the preseason frequently. It just feels like the Saints and the Rams, despite being in opposite divisions for a very long time, are just two teams that you see on the same field over and over and over again. And they're never an easy out. Like they always feel like that's a team that the Rams are in tight games with, and that's another one that if we're prognosticating about what win or lose, That's one that could go either way. Those are the ones that could determine your season, quite frankly. That was a big win that the Rams had against Saints on Thursday night this season, kind of launched them into that next that next level. And it feels like that Saints game is always that game for the Rams.
For sure. That's definitely a game that can go either way. Definitely a coin flip game where you're not surprised if they win, but you're not shocked if they lose as well, right? It goes in between. I think the NFC North is interesting as well. Of course, if you got the Lions, I mean, that goes without saying. They made the playoffs. They made the NFC Championship game.
Yep.
And you got that matchup. That's going to be on the road. That definitely feels Sunday Night Football. That feels like it's NFL game. We could book that one, right? Yeah. So you look at the home game. So the NFC North, the Lions, you got the Bears. The Bears, of course, I mean, they finished pretty strong.
There's no bad team.
Will they start over quarterback?
Yeah, there's no bad team in the NFC North. You know, maybe the Bears aren't great, but they don't stink. The Packers are a playoff team. The Lions are a playoff team. The Minnesota Vikings, we'll see what happens with Kirk Cousins, but if he's back in Minnesota, then they're a very different team because he's a very good NFL quarterback. There's no easy putt in that game. But of all the games we've talked about, the Rams going back to Detroit again is a deadlock cinch Sunday night, Monday night game. You bet your house that is a primetime game.
100%. That's going to be a primetime game, and you're going to see Dan Campbell, Sean McVay. It's going to be electric. But you look at the home games, so outside of the division games, you got Packers, Vikings, Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, Raiders. Those are the home games. To me, the one that stands out, of course, Packers, Bills. That's going to be a game that you're going to see a lot of Bills Mafia in the house. Yeah. Dolphins is cool to see out here on the West Coast, but I love that game against the Raiders, man. Anytime it's Raiders, of course, Raider Nation, we saw it happen. Baker Mayfield, Van Jefferson a few years ago. That's going to be awesome. And then the away games, Bears, Lions, Patriots, Jets, Saints. I mean, those are all potentially very tough weather environments outside of Detroit and New Orleans. So, look, this schedule is a schedule that is a second-place schedule, and there's nothing that ever comes easy in the National Football League. We're going to continue to break down this schedule, but, yeah, just kind of final thoughts about the away game you're looking most forward to. It sounds like it's the Lions.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's an opportunity, and we'll see what happens. You know, Dan Campbell was talking about it the other day that, you know, there's no guarantee that they get back to where they just were in an NFC Championship game. That there's always one of those teams that we feel like is going to be good that drops out. The Lions are an interesting candidate for that. Like, you wonder if that wasn't they were relatively healthy. Jared Goff had a great year. You've got those two backs. You've got Laporta. You've got St. Brown, who kind of broke onto the scene in a big way this season. And if even one or two of those things kind of falls back to the mean, I think that the Lions, you know, like we talked about, that division is very good. Everybody sees them coming this year. That's the one that I'm most excited about. And because I feel like there's a little bit of something going on with Matthew Stafford too, going back there, that I'm sure he'd like to ball out. So I can't, that one can't get here fast enough.
And by the way, my new dream job is to be the kicker for the Detroit Lions, right? I mean, how great would that be? There's no pressure. You don't have to kick. It's just awesome, right? I think it's just my dream job, be the kicker for the Detroit Lions. Okay, hear me? Okay, cool. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And for Travis Rogers, you can follow him on X at Travis Rogers, the People's Champ. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.